So the times of transfers and appointments in our community. And so some of the men are being moved to different places throughout our province. Father Bill is being moved from the shrine here, as you know, down to the center connected to St. Francis Parish on Green Street. About 2 months ago, he had asked me to accompany him to South Philadelphia to go to IKEA. Now, I don't know if many of you know about IKEA. It's this magnificent warehouse. It's a brilliant idea. They bring in these boxed pieces, and basically it's a do-it-yourself store. You bring the pieces home, and you're smart enough, you get it done in no time, and otherwise you sit there and you look at it and you say, what have I bought? Why can't I just buy it assembled? So Father Bill and I are in the store walking around, and all of a sudden, an alarm goes off. And we look at each other in a sort of a panic way, because we're saying to ourselves, do we have to run for the doors? Do we have to do something? And all of a sudden, the announcement came across. At this time, we are going to cease operations. The doors will be closed, registers will be shut off, and we are asking everyone to be on the lookout for a young girl, about 12 years old, who was separated from her parents. It was a brilliant effort on the part of IKEA. They were concerned with the child, and so they shut everything down. Well, the child was found in what it was called the ballroom, which is just this mixture of balls that kids jump around in. But she was hiding underneath because she got in trouble a few days before. So it goes on that we're standing not too far from the ballroom when the girl is found. And like any good child, the first way to get out of trouble is to start crying. And obviously the parents are absolutely hysterical themselves. And despite them, I'm a big Irish guy, I'm a wuss when it comes to those things, and I'm just pouring with tears too. Because this child had been scarily lost and now has been found. It's a great, joyful moment. But I suspect in the back of that girl's head, she knew she had to pay the price for separating from her parents. And so she just laid it on thick, and the tears just kept on rolling. And then at some point, the parents said, "Why did you get away from us? Why did you separate from us?" And the questions started answering. Today's is the day that I want to speak to you about that fifth joyful mystery, the finding of Jesus in the temple. And in reflecting upon it, I was trying to understand the joy, because the joy is kind of mixed, it seems to me. The finding of Jesus in the temple, and then the questioning of Jesus by his parents. But the key thing is the finding of Jesus in the temple. That is what just brings joy to his parents, and also brings a sense of hope and promise for us. Allow me to explain. So we have this experience of Jesus and Mary finding their son amidst the teachers. First of all, he's amidst the family. Now, any of you have had a big family, you know that sometimes, I know I have, been left behind because they forget about some kids. It's just a reality. But after a while, you say to yourself, you got to start searching for the kid because, and I'm not too small, I've never been too small, so in some sense, I've always been noticeable. But the joy of seeing the child, but then trying to figure out, what is this kid doing up there with all these bigwigs? Why is this child amongst the teachers? Why is he taking on and conversing with the elders? And so the parents are trying to figure this out. I think of that experience when I think of parents dropping their kids off at the university. It's a horrible experience, a gut-wrenching experience of having to see your children get older and move on. I see it when fathers walk their daughters down the aisle. It's a wonderful occasion for the daughter, and here's the father bawling his eyes out. It just doesn't make sense. And I see some wives now poking their husbands and saying, I remember the day. But there's a story behind this, and the beauty is this, is that Jesus gets lost in the temple. And the encouragement is for us to get lost also. Get lost in God's love. Get lost in God's prescripts. Get lost in God's plans. 9 years ago when I moved back to New York from Chicago, I hadn't been in Brooklyn and Queens much in my life. I grew up on Long Island. And so when I got back to New York, I decided I'm never going to take the same way back and forth from the city back to the university. Now, the people who were driving with me thought I was crazy and nuts, but you already know I'm crazy and nuts in some respect. But the reality is, I love getting lost. I love getting lost because you see things you've never seen before. You encounter neighborhoods you've heard about only in passing. So my father grew up in East New York. My mother grew up in Woodhaven. I never knew what that was about. But coming across this sign, welcome to Woodhaven, you're now in East New York, I said to myself, this is wonderful. I allowed myself time. So the difficulty is sometimes we have our lives so planned out. We're so efficient, we're so regulated, we're so organized. And yet, the reality is that in getting lost, we find ourselves found by God and found in God. Jesus found himself lost in the temple, but it was a loss that was in some sense an incredible experience for him. Because there he's trying to find the meaning, the hope, the promise of his Father's message. And that's the encouragement to us, to get lost in God's love, to get lost in God's message. We have our lives well planned out, and I'm sure many of us stick to those schedules. But the encouragement for us is to allow ourselves a little leeway and allow ourselves a little risk. And in doing so, we'll find ourselves with great joy. It was once said by a poet that a saint is one who dreams with their eyes wide open. A saint is a person who dreams with their eyes wide open. I had a teacher in grammar school that would always tease us a bit when we were daydreaming and encourage us, come on back. When you're back, let me know. But never dismissed us from the possibility of daydreaming. It's dreaming, it's hoping, it's thinking of what God has in store for us and God promises us that makes our realities transformed and gives us the hope and the joy of today. The great St. Augustine, as you know, wrote this book, City of God. And he said that humanity lives between the city of God and the city of man. We have our hearts set on the city of God while living in the city of man. And so we try for those two things to somehow influence one another in such a way that the city of God might become more prevalent in the city of man. But the only way that we get to know the virtues, the values, and the vision of the city of God is by getting lost in that city of God. My friends, I encourage us to be dreamers. I encourage us to get lost in the temple of God. I encourage us to find ourselves wandering about in the mind and the heart and the love of God. And in doing so, my friends, our lives will be transformed, our world will be more godlike, and we'll find ourselves with a deep, abiding joy.